It's amazing how January 6th just keeps coming up. Today, we're going to deep dive into something pretty big that happened because of it. A top FBI official in New York had a really strong public reaction to what might happen to the agents who investigated the attack on the Capitol.
Yeah, and this isn't just something happening inside the FBI. This is about whether the FBI can work without being influenced by politics, especially when something is as politically charged as January 6th was.
Exactly. To get a good understanding of all this, we've been looking at some sources. There's a YouTube video where Glenn Kirshner talks about this, and we also have some reporting from the New York Times that gives us even more details.
So what we're trying to do with this deep dive is really understand the concerns here. What exactly is this FBI official worried about, and what could happen because of it? Not just for the FBI itself, but also for all the investigations that are still going on about January 6th.
So let's start with James Dean. He's the special agent in charge of the FBI's New York field office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's not just any field office. It's one of the biggest and most important ones in the whole FBI.
I see.
And everybody says that Dean is really well respected, like a veteran agent with a ton of experience.
Right. And that probably makes a big difference here. It makes people take his concerns seriously. It's not like he's just reacting without thinking. This is coming from someone who really understands the FBI.
Yeah, for sure. And he definitely made his feelings known in an email he sent to his staff. His main point was that he's going to dig in and fight against anything that targets his agents unfairly.
Okay.
He's super direct about it. He told them they're in the middle of a battle where good people are being walked out just for doing their jobs the right way.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense.
Yeah, and it's important to understand the timing of this email. It came right after the Justice Department ordered the FBI to put together a list of every single person who worked on the January 6th investigations. We could be talking about a huge number of people, like reports say it might be 6,000 FBI employees. That's a huge chunk of the entire bureau.
Right. And to think that this one order could mean that so many people who worked on this investigation get singled out makes you wonder what they're really after here. It's not just a few people. It's like they're trying to review everything the FBI did about January 6th and think about what this could do to future investigations, especially ones that are politically sensitive. It could really make people hesitate to get involved.
Exactly. And of course, this has got everybody in the FBI really worried and anxious. Dean himself said that in his message. And to make things even worse, there's this remarkable questionnaire that's been going around among FBI employees.
Yeah, what's so remarkable about this questionnaire is what they're asking about. They want employees to give them all the details about what they did on the January 6th investigations. And I mean, really basic stuff like collecting evidence, doing interviews, getting warrants signed, even administrative work or testifying in court, like all the everyday things the FBI does. Isn't that a little strange? For the DOJ to ask for this much information about these normal tasks, what reason could they have for such a broad request? And how does the idea of political targeting fit in?
You got it. These aren't special or controversial tasks. This is just what the FBI does every day.
Right.
And the fact that they had to write down every little detail about this stuff just for the January 6th investigation seems like a huge red flag,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
They even gave them a deadline of Monday to fill out these forms.
Wow.
Although, obviously, that's already passed.
Right.
But imagine being told to suddenly document all these routine things you did,
Yeah.
especially when you know that people might get in trouble because of it.
Yeah, it makes sense why people would be worried. It's like they're being set up.
Exactly. And in all this chaos, Dean is really standing up for his staff.
Yeah.
He told them to stay calm and not make any big career decisions without thinking it through.
Good advice.
He promised to help them no matter what happens.
Okay.
And then he said something really powerful. He said, "Time for me to dig in."
That's a real statement of support. When things are so uncertain and people are scared, a leader who's got your back can make all the difference. And when he says dig in, he's saying he's ready to fight and protect his team from anything that seems unfair, shows how much he cares about his agents.
And he even used this really interesting analogy to explain how he feels. He talked about foxholes.
Okay.
To show just how serious things are and how much pressure he feels like his team is under. He talked about this experience he had as a Marine back in the early 1990s.
Okay.
He had to dig this small foxhole, like 5 feet deep, just to be safe. And for anyone who's been in the military or even understands what a foxhole is for, that means a lot. It's about protecting yourself when there's danger all around you. It's a place to be safe and strong. And that idea of needing to protect yourself like that says a lot about how threatened people in the FBI feel right now. It's not just about some paperwork. It's like they're under attack just for doing their jobs. And he didn't just say it was something they had to do. He said it sucked, but it worked. And it's like he's not trying to be dramatic or anything. He's just being real about how much he's willing to do to protect his people, even if it's hard and unpleasant. And that image of digging in for safety really shows how serious things are for him.
Definitely. It's not just about playing politics or anything like that. It's about keeping the people he's responsible for safe. And the fact that he was a Marine makes it even more powerful. It shows he's got this deep sense of duty, and he's not backing down when things get tough. It's amazing how such a simple story can show how determined he is.
Yeah. And another interesting thing he did was thank the acting FBI officials in Washington, Brian Driscoll and Mr. Casson.
Right.
He talked about how they tried to stop career employees from being fired right away and how they pushed for a formal review process. He even called them warriors.
That's important that he mentioned he's got support from the leadership in Washington.
Right.
Shows that he's not alone in feeling this way.
Right.
And that there are people high up in the FBI who are resisting this pressure too. And the fact that they want a formal review process is huge. It means that they're trying to make sure that things are done fairly and that people aren't punished without a reason. And it shows that even in big organizations like the FBI, there are ways to make sure things are done right.
So now let's talk about why all of this might be happening. The reports we've seen directly connect this order from the Justice Department to the possibility that political appointees are trying to go after the career officials who investigated January 6th.
Yeah, this is where it gets really tricky, where law enforcement and politics mix. Basically, it's like they're trying to punish these people or push them out of the way because they investigated something that made the last administration look bad.
Right.
It's really concerning because it suggests that investigations could be controlled by political agendas instead of just following the facts and the evidence. What happens to the public's trust in law enforcement when things like this happen?
It's like they're saying that FBI agents might get in trouble just for doing their job, investigating a crime that happened right in the middle of our democracy.
Exactly. And if that's how things really work, then the FBI can't really function the way it's supposed to, independently and without being afraid of politics. If agents are worried about getting in trouble for investigating certain people or events, then they're going to be less likely to do a good job in the future. It could really damage how thorough and fair investigations are.
And this reminds me of what Glenn Kirshner called points of light. These are people in the system who are trying to do the right thing, even when they're facing pressure like this.
Deanne himself and those acting FBI officials he mentioned, they seem like they're really standing up to this kind of political overreach.
Yeah, those points of light are so important to keeping institutions honest. They're willing to fight against what they think is wrong, even if it puts them at risk. It's like a safeguard against the FBI losing its values. It really shows how much courage it takes to do what's right, especially when you're part of a big organization.
And you know, if these agents do end up getting fired, it's very possible there will be wrongful termination lawsuits later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those lawsuits wouldn't just be a legal headache. They would be public proof that maybe these firings weren't done for the right reasons. It would really add fuel to the idea that political motives are influencing personnel decisions in a very important law enforcement agency.
Exactly.
So to sum it all up, the big thing here is that a top FBI official in New York is very publicly supporting his agents who investigated January 6th. Wow. He sees all this backlash they might face as a fight against people who are trying to undermine the law.
Yeah.
And he's making it very clear that he's going to do everything he can to protect them.
This situation really shows how complicated things can get when you've got law enforcement investigations mixed with a really intense political climate. It's definitely important that people like James Dean are standing up for what they believe in and protecting the people who work for them. But it also makes you think about some bigger questions.
And here's the question for you.
All right.
What does all of this tell us about how independent law enforcement agencies really are? Can they really stay separate from politics?
Right.
And maybe even more importantly, what happens to justice when the people who are supposed to be investigating things are under attack?
Good question.
It's complicated, right? And it really affects the kind of society we all live in. Something to think about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Something we should all be paying attention to.
No doubt about it.
Really important stuff.